So you were born where?
Born in Old Forge, Pennsylvania. And I moved here when I was, I think 5 years old. You know, I think 4 or 5. I can't quite place it. Moved here in 1943, and families from same town, Filito, and Old Forge, Pennsylvania is where a lot of the families that lived here stopped off first or second. When my father came over in 1913, he came to Cincinnati first. He was a water boy on a crew that was making a log road out of Queen City Avenue. They were placing logs in the road. He lived here for just a short while, and then he took off with relatives, and they traveled all over looking for work. Went with the DeStasi family up to Cleveland, Tonawanda, New York, and then he went to Baltimore with his brother. Actually, he had two brothers that were here before him. One went back to Italy, the other one stayed here, and then they ended up in Old Forge. But almost every family here has family in Old Forge, Pennsylvania, that coal mining town. So my father worked there until 1943, 1942. My grandmother died. My mother's mother died, and so they had enough money to get out of the coal mines, and thanks to the war, there were jobs here. So he came back here for a year and then sent for us, and he bought 2 houses next door to the church here. And there were 6 apartments in it. And so now that became a culture shock, you know, moving into, all these guys are talking about they were born here, they didn't know any different as they were growing up. Well, I came from a little town where there were nice little houses with fairly sizable lots, and we had backyards, we had chickens, we had goats, neighbors had all kinds of animals. It was not quite as densely populated. So when we moved here, it was a huge culture shock for me. I was just a little kid, but my sisters were in high school, and that was rough on. One adjusted very well, and one never did adjust over the time, because then we were all crammed into a small apartment at first. Even though he bought the 2 houses, we ended up living in the smallest apartment upstairs over what used to be a saloon. And we couldn't get into the apartment that was supposed to be ours for a year. So we had a toilet downstairs, no bath at all, and an outhouse in the backyard. So it was a bit of a culture shock coming from a house, and then you look down the street and there's a factory. Now, it didn't mean a whole lot to me. And then a little rougher because I hadn't been baptized yet. In Pennsylvania, kids get baptized whenever because everybody in the town was Catholic. Here, public schools and what have you, and we didn't have Catholic schools in Pennsylvania. They didn't need them. They took me down to St. Bonaventure to get baptized, and the priest said, well, I'm not going to baptize him because my father, was away from the church, which came about through a long story during the Depression, and actually goes all the way back to Italy, came with him. So told him to go back to Pennsylvania and make peace with the church, and they would baptize me. My father said that's not going to happen, so I ended up even more of an outsider, since I went to Central Fairmount School, that nice-looking school up the top of the hill here.
What was it like to go to school there?
Okay, beautiful, beautiful place. Wasn't a bad school at all or anything like that, but it was a little tough fit with the neighborhood. On top of that, my father owned the apartment house, and there were 6 or 7 people, and people constantly moving in and out. It was densely populated. Let's call it that. So this was ground zero for South Fairmount, basically. This corner being next to the church and the whole thing. So
where did your dad work?
he worked at aluminum industries. Now, one of the things that most of the people here around here, awful lot of them worked at Lunkenheimer's. My 2 sisters worked at Lunkenheimer's. One had a very long career there. Another one went on and worked for a drug company, then got married. But one sister had she was there as long as Lunkenheimer's was there. An awful lot of people worked there. Aluminum Industries was up on the end of and the Queen City out on the work road.